All right, welcome to Mrs. Abrams Band Studio in her apartment. This is an introduction to concert band for brand new band students or students who've played for a year or two but might be looking for a new instrument and not entirely sure what they could or should play. So just a few of the basics. First of all, as band teachers, ideally in each class, we have something called the pyramid of sound. And it's actually a scientific thing that says you don't need too many of the high instruments. The high frequency instruments in science carry their sound very, very easily. And the lower instruments, actually the vibrational frequencies of the lower instruments help make the higher instruments sound better and richer. This is why people spend lots and lots of money on big bass speakers for their fancy cars, because the bass instruments are actually a very, very core component of the band. So just so you know, at the top of the pyramid, we have bells, piccolos, flutes, and oboes. In a concert band, a class of about 30 kids, it would be nice to have about 4 flutes and 3 percussionists, one that plays bells, one that plays snare drum, and one that plays bass drum. And the percussionists rotate through. So 3 percussionists, about 4 flute players, about 4 trumpets, 5 clarinets, 3 alto saxophones, they're a little bit louder, and then 4 trombones, 2 baritones or euphoniums, 2 tubas would be lovely. It's nice to have 2 because they can learn from each other and they feel supported. Euphoniums, baritones, and tubas are all very similar sounding instruments. The tuba is just an octave lower. The baritones and euphoniums, which are pretty much interchangeable words, they sound the same as the trombone. They have the same length of tubing. They read the same notes, and they sound the same. They just played a little differently. And then we have the bass guitars, which in high school you will learn to play the upright bass, those really big ones that are as big as you are. But in elementary school, we keep you on a bass guitar, electric bass. Tenor saxophones, bass clarinets. Then there are a few instruments in here that probably will not be played by beginner students. Bassoons and oboes are double reed instruments and they're a bit tricky. You have to be pretty good to play one of those. Maybe leave those for high school. Baritone saxes are way too big for an elementary student, so you might graduate to those from an alto sax. Maybe your first year, a tenor sax your second year, and a bari sax in high school if you like that bass sound. And then, yeah, that's it. There's also French horns, which are also like the oboes and the bassoons, a little bit tricky. So if you want to play, if you are interested in those instruments, just let me know. Now, the only other thing to note in this is if you already play violin, you have had lessons on violin, you still have a private teacher on violin, you can play violin in a concert band. It's not a normal concert band instruments. The violins and violas and cellos usually play in orchestras, not concert bands. It's a different kind of band. So there is an orchestra in Richmond that if you wanted to play those instruments, you could. And I have had students who didn't want to learn a new instrument play the flute part on the violin. And I had one student who wanted to really felt passionately about cello, and he learned to play the cello reading the trombone baritone parts. And he had a private teacher, and his private teacher said the notes that we learn in concert band don't really fit the notes that you learn at the beginning on cello, but that kid made it work, and he was a great addition to the band. So next I'm going to really briefly go over the families of instruments. In concert band, we have 4 families of instruments. The first are the woodwinds, the flute. In high school, you might also play the piccolo, which is half the size of the flute, same fingering, but very, very high. The oboe and the bassoon are part of the woodwind family. They're double reed instruments, and I'll talk to you about reeds in a minute. Our single reed instruments are the clarinet, bass clarinet, alto sax, tenor sax, and bari sax. All of those instruments play on a single reed made out of bamboo. They come in different strengths. Beginners, if you're playing a single reed instrument, when you rent your instrument or buy your instrument or do anything, you should buy at least one box of 10 reeds because they're very easy to break and beginners do have a tendency to go through reeds quite quickly. I do as a teacher tend to have a few reeds that I can sell you for $2 each, but it's cheaper and better if you have a box of your own. All right, so that's the woodwind family. The brass family is the trumpet, the French horn, the trombone, the baritone euphonium, same instrument, similar words, and the tuba. The percussion family, if you're going to become a percussionist, this is for people that maybe already play the piano, already know how to learn, already know notes and rhythms, people that can keep a beat really steady, that can watch the conductor. I think sometimes students choose to be percussionists because they think it's easier, they just have to hit a drum. And in actuality, it is one of the most difficult of the sections, and it's one of the most exposed of the sections. So I actually last year started a tradition of auditioning kids before I let them into the percussion section. There is a teacher in Richmond who won't let kids into her percussion section unless they have at least grade 8 Royal Conservatory piano. That's how strongly she feels about percussionists needing to be really, really good. As a percussionist, you could play upwards of 60 different instruments. In our normal concert band rehearsals, 3 percussionists usually will rotate through playing the bells, the snare drum, and the bass drum. So every exercise, they'll just rotate and play a different instrument. All right, so let's start with the woodwind family. I've got a flute, a clarinet, and an alto saxophone here to show you. This is the flute. It is the highest of our instruments in our concert band at elementary level. It comes in 3 pieces. The foot, which goes on gently and it lines up, the bar of the keys lines up in the middle with the last hole on the body. And then it also has a head joint. So you blow on the head joint. That's one of the first exercises you'll do. It's like blowing across the top of a pop bottle. You put your finger in this little slot between your chin bone and your bottom lip, and that's where the lip plate goes. The instrument goes off to the right, and you just learn to figure out where your mouth needs to go. It's corners down firm, and your tonguing. And you'll just do, as a beginner, you'll do a lot of that. I also get beginner flute players to spit rice to get a feeling for what that tonguing should feel like. So then you put the head joint in, you line up the tone hole with the top keys on the body. The most important part for the grip of the flute is that the left hand holds the entire weight of the instrument, and the finger goes between this thumb key and these 2 tiny little top keys. And the flute weight of the instrument is like you point a gun, and the weight of the instrument sits on this part of your finger, okay? Then your thumb gets closed and your other fingers curl up. Your pinky sits on this key here. It just sits on it, it doesn't push it down. But that's where you line up that left hand. And again, you want to have kind of an upside down L with your left hand. The right hand comes over the instrument in kind of a flat C form, thumb on the bottom, pinky on the first of the foot keys, 1, 2, 3. And then this is what the flute sounds like. I'll just play you a quick scale. Now, one of the things I want to really emphasize is please pick your instrument for band when you hear an instrument that makes you go, oh yeah, I want to make that sound. That sound makes me happy. I've had a lot of students, there's basically 3 reasons that students choose an instrument. One, which is so not a good way to pick an instrument, they pick the flute or the clarinet or maybe even the trumpet because it's small and easy to carry, and they think they'll be easy to get to and from school. And while that's true, as a motivator for learning an instrument, it is probably the worst. So please don't pick your instrument based on the size of it. If you have trouble getting your instrument to and from school, there are ways to help you out with that. All right, so that's the flute. The flute sound might make you go, oh, yeah, I want to make that sound. Students often ask me which is the easiest instrument. My answer to that is honestly, every instrument has its difficulties. And some people's lips are more suited to different instruments. That's why when we usually do this lesson, I have one of the music stores come in, usually Tapestry Music, and we do what's called an instrument petting zoo. And the kids all get to try at least one wind instrument and one brass instrument just to see what their embouchure suits best. But in times of COVID, we can't do that. So you're gonna have to put up with me in this. So the next instrument that I'm gonna show you is the clarinet. So this is the clarinet. It is a single reed woodwind instrument, the second of the woodwind instruments. So I'm just soaking the alto sax and the clarinet reeds in some water. They must be wet. So here's the difficulty on the clarinet and the saxophone. To get this tiny little reed on without breaking it, to get it high enough, not too high, not too low, not too far one side or the other. You slide the reed in behind this silver thing, which is called the ligature. You bring it down, you line it up with the top, you pull that ligature down, and you tighten up the screws on the ligature so that that reed doesn't move. Then, if you press on the reed, a thin black line should appear at the top of the reed. Now, I've got this reed on a tiny bit crooked. I can feel it. It's not centered, so I'm going to redo that. Pull down, check the height. Okay, so we're good. Now, I'm not going to show you how to put the clarinet together, other than the holes need to be lined up. And as you're putting the flute and the clarinet together, it's very, very important that you don't put any pressure on these really long keys. They happen on the flute as well. There's these really long rods, and on the saxophone. As you're putting it together, hold it at the top, hold it at the bottom, hold it wherever those long keys are not. Because if you put pressure on those long keys as you're trying to put the instrument together, they can get bent quite easily. So be a little careful of that. So I'm just going to show you what's called, like on the flute we had the head joint sound. This on a reed instrument, we call this the crow pitch. And it's a horrible sound, just so you know. It sounds like a duck call, if you've ever seen those duck call things. But if you can make this pitch on either just the mouthpiece or the mouthpiece and the barrel, then you know you've got your reed on right. So you curl your bottom lip over your bottom teeth. You put your top teeth touching the mouthpiece. And the whole rest of your mouth, what we call the embouchure in band, comes in like a drawstring around the mouthpiece, nice and tight so no air leaks. So, that is called the crow pitch. Now, we put it together, lining the reed up with this thumb hole and register key on the back and the thumb rest on the bottom. And this is what a scale sounds on the clarinet. I'll try and go through 2 octaves. I love the bottom end of the clarinet, but I have trouble making the top end of it sound that pretty. And that's just a matter of practice. You can make the top end of a clarinet sound gorgeous as soon as your embouchure gets strong enough. But I'm a trumpet player, so. All right, the last of the woodwind instruments is the alto saxophone. So again, we have the mouthpiece with the ligature, and we have the water in which we soak the reed. Now you can get the reed wet with your saliva by just putting it in your mouth. A lot of students will do that, but the saliva is actually meant to break down food in your mouth, so it breaks down the reeds, makes them softer, makes them wear out faster, and it's just for me, I don't like putting the reed in my mouth. It doesn't taste very good. So I like to soak it in water, and there's little film cases I can give you. You can pick them up at any London Drugs photo processing store. Just go ask them for the little old-fashioned film cases. So the crow pitch on the alto sax mouthpiece, it's a little bit wider of a reed. Again, I've got it on, I've got the ligature tightened. If I push, I get a little fine black line. Not that you can see that from over there, but bottom lip over bottom teeth, top teeth touching. That's called the crow pitch. Now I take the neck of the instrument and I just really carefully slide that neck onto the cork of the neck. Now this little key here is called the octave key. It is very, very delicate. You don't want to be trying to put the top neck of the alto sax on, holding it like this, because I guarantee you'll bend this key a little bit and then the sax won't work. So make sure when you're holding the neck of the saxophone, you hold it from underneath. Okay, so not touching this key. So I need to, when I'm picking up the alto saxophone, I pick it up by the bell. That's the safest. I put the neck strap around my neck right away, and I clip the neck strap onto the back of the saxophone. Oh, and I see that missing. Where? Okay, here it is. So something did not get put back properly on this saxophone. This is called the neck cap. And it just when you store the instrument, you need to store it with that end cap in, because it protects something called the octave key from getting bent. So that little plastic piece should always be in there, protecting it in its case at all times. When you go to play, you take it out, you put it back in its case and wait to put it away. And again, I'm going to put this on, holding it underneath, and it's just a little wiggle. So a little wiggle, little wiggle, little wiggle, wiggle, little wiggle. And now I've got it down, sunk into the top of that. I can tighten that a little bit. There, and I've got my octave key and that key that triggers it there. On the back of the saxophone, there's a thumb rest on the bottom for your right hand and a thumb button on the top for your left hand. The keys are 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'll play a little bit for you. You want to be able to keep your head straight. A lot of beginner saxophones, they end up kind of trying to play a little bit crooked. So if you want to put the saxophone a little bit to the right, you want to turn the mouthpiece so it's not in line with the saxophone, but it's in line with your face. So, and if I'm not lifting this instrument up, it naturally is coming in right at my chin, which is no good. So I want to pull up the neck strap so that when I'm not holding it and I bring it up to my mouth, it comes right to my mouth. I would even go a little tiny bit higher. There. So it's coming right to my mouth and I don't have to lift it up to my mouth. That's the purpose of the neck strap. So this is what an alto sax sounds like. Keep in mind I'm a trumpet player, so I'll do my best. Again, hit that top note. Tricky to get the right octave on it. But again, that's a matter of learning to control your embouchure enough so that you grip the reed with enough tightness to make sure that the right octave is coming out. It's easy to remember what fingers to put down. It's not quite so easy to get your embouchure built up. Takes a bit of practicing. All right, so that's the alto saxophone. Again, we need about 4 flutes, maybe 5 clarinets, 3 saxophones in our classrooms of 30. And that pyramid of sound, that's just a goal. It's my goal. But if I have a kid that my sax section is full, I have 3 saxophones already, but there's a kid that comes to me and says, Mrs. Abrams, I know I'm late, or they come into the school late, And the saxophone is the only thing they want to play, or the flute is the only, whatever instrument, and my section's full, I'm far more likely to say yes to a kid's choice of instrument if they're truly passionate about it, because my goal as a band teacher is to create lifelong musicians and lifelong lovers of music and players. I played in a band where there were 80-year-olds joyfully playing, joyfully keeping their brains active and their souls happy through music. And that's what I want for all of my students, for you to know the joy of music making. All right, so that goes away. Again, we replace the end cap, that very important end cap that protects the octave key. I'm holding it by the bell, and I slide it back into its case, and I take the mouthpiece off, put the neck back into its case, take off the reed. Oh, and at this point, actually, you can also dry. There's a cloth that you can pull through the mouthpiece to dry it. You don't want to pull that cloth through the neck. It's too big to go through the neck. So lots of kids will lose a cloth or get a cloth stuck in the neck. So you don't want to do that. And I would put the reed back in its case and store it that way. So here's a case for the reed. This is just a bottom case. And you just slide it very carefully, tip first, into the little case. All right, on to the brass family. So the main instruments in elementary band for the woodwind family to review are the flute, the clarinet, and the saxophone. If you're renting a clarinet or a saxophone, you need to buy a box of 10 reeds. The strength for beginners should be about a 1.5, maximum 2. Don't buy a box of 2.5. You might get to be able to play on a 2.5 reed by the time you get to Christmas if you're practicing a lot. But most of the time, a 1.5 or a 2 will do a beginner through at least their first year or so. All right, so the trumpet, my instrument. So I told you to beware of picking an instrument because it's small. The second reason that kids pick instruments, and this is why I picked my instrument when I was 10, is that their older siblings played it. My oldest sister played the clarinet. She practiced every morning at 6 a.m. I did not learn a love for clarinet because of that. I now love it. I think it's a gorgeous instrument, particularly the low end, but it took me a long time to get over those 6 a.m. clarinet practices. My middle sister played the trumpet, and she was kind and she would let me play it, and I felt like I knew a little bit about it. So because I was familiar with it, that's the one I picked to play. My brother played the trombone, and I really wish he had let me play the trombone, because if I had it all to do over again, I would definitely become a trombone player. I love the sound, the rich, warm sound of the trombone, the baritone, those low brass instruments. They make my heart happy. But here's the trumpet. Now, one thing about the brass instruments, all of them except the trombone, pretty easy to put together. Mouthpiece, into the lead pipe, little bit of a twist, you're done. So what makes the sound on a brass instrument is the buzzing or the vibrating of the lips together. So the trick is to say the letter M, leave your lips quite tight together. Well, take a big deep breath, say the letter M, leave your lips quite tight together, and then try to blow air through them in a steady, long way. Like count. How many seconds can you blow for? So let me demo. I can get to about 25. Sometimes if I've been practicing a lot, I can get to 30. So you put it in, you give it a little twist, you don't bang on it. If you do bang on it, it will get stuck. And if it does get stuck, parents and students, please don't try to get it unstuck by yourself. There's a very specific tool called a mouthpiece puller that needs to be used to get a mouthpiece safely out of a horn when it gets stuck. So just bring that instrument to me or the band teacher, and they will use the correct tool to get it out. Quite a few instruments have been wrecked by people trying to get the mouthpiece out when it's stuck and they don't have the right tool. It's quite easy and fast with the right tool, but it's not very easy and fast without the right tool. All right, so notice on this instrument, the flute and the clarinet, We counted the keys once. There was, I think on the clarinet there were 26 keys. So similarly on the flute, lots of keys to keep track of. On the trumpet and trombone and baritone and tuba and French horn, there's usually only 3 keys to worry about, making it seem like a much simpler instrument, right? You'd think, but no. So the trick on the brass instruments is you change the pitch most of the time by speeding up the air. So if I'm doing that buzzing thing, if my air is low and slow, I get kind of a low note. And then I'm going to do what's called a glissando, and I'm going to go from as low as I can to as high as I can with my buzz, and just watch what's happening with my air. And my air comes from down here in my tummy. That's the other thing. People think the air comes from your lungs, and it really comes from a push from your diaphragm in your tummy. Yoga breathing, for any of you who are yoga people. Yoga breathing is excellent for learning what your diaphragm is and how to breathe with it. So, big breath in. M. I am out of shape. So I got up and about halfway back down. You can do that again with the mouthpiece. You anchor it on your bottom lip, feeling your bottom teeth through your bottom lip, nice and strong. You don't want to be moving the trumpet around or moving the mouthpiece around. You take a deep breath, say the letter M, tip the mouthpiece up, do the same thing. M. Again, try for a long tone as you start. See how many seconds you go. Challenge yourself to go further and further and longer with that one note buzz. That's the beginning. And then maybe you do 2 notes. See how long you can do that for. Yeah, so put it in, and then let me show you. There are 7 different notes I can hit without pushing down a single valve. That's interesting. So then there are actually 6 different valve combinations. If I put the middle valve down, it sends the air around this little extra piece of tubing, taking the note down a semitone. So here's the open. Right? First valve down. There is no valve position that's just the 3rd valve. 1, 2, 3, by the way. Numbering from the mouthpiece towards the bell. 1, 2, 3. So the first valve sends the air around this little bit longer extra tubing, allowing us to get these notes. Here's open, middle, and then first. Down another semitone. And then here's all the notes you can hit with this valve down. Anyway, that's the trumpet. Let me do you a quick scale. That's what the trumpet sounds like. Trumpet plays in the jazz band, saxophone plays in the, any instrument can play in the jazz band, but trumpet's one of the main ones. Yeah, you end up playing taps at a lot of Remembrance Day services. That's kind of fun. Taps is played with no valves at all. It's done all with the air in the lips, which makes it both easy and hard. Yeah, that's the trumpet. And that's the instrument that I play. All right, so trombone. Trombone comes in 3 pieces. It's got the slide and the bell. This actually is a trigger trombone or a, Actually, I'm not totally sure of the name of it. Without the trigger, they're called tenor trombones. So yeah, sorry. You put the slide together. There's a one part of the slide has threads for the bolt, and you put that part of the slide in. You tighten that bolt down. You want the trombone to make kind of a little bit of a V with the slide. So not an L, but a little bit of a V. And then you want that bolt to be tightened enough so that it's not moving on you. And then you've got your mouthpiece. And again, bigger mouthpiece than the trumpet. The euphonium and baritone mouthpieces are the same size. The tuba is a little bit bigger. Tuba mouthpiece is a little bit bigger. And the French horn mouthpiece is actually a little smaller than the trumpet mouthpiece. All right, and you know how I could hit 8 notes on the trumpet without moving the valves? The thing that makes the French horn very tricky is you can hit about 20 notes without moving the valves. So it's an instrument for only the people that can really hear whether they're on the right note or not. All right, so here's some notes on the trombone. Section, unique for most instruments in that it can slide. It can slide between notes. So there's actually, just like there's 7 different valve combinations on most 3-valved instruments, on a trombone there are 7 different slide positions. The first one is all the way in. The second one is little bit between the mouthpiece and the bell. The third is just before the bell. The fourth is just after the bell. Fifth is sort of a curved arm past the bell. Sixth is a straight arm, and the 7th position, you have to have a straight arm and put your shoulder into it. So here's a scale on the trombone. Let me see if I can remember it. Oh, and this trigger trombone, my rotary valve is a bit busted, so here we go. On the C is a little bit too far out. Anyway, so that's the trombone. Baritone, similar valve positions. The trombone, baritone, euphonium, tuba all read the bass clef. The trumpet and the French horn read the treble clef. That's the high notes on the instrument, and the bass clef are the bass notes on the instrument, the low ones. Flute, clarinet, and saxophone all read treble clef. If you're a piano player, bend will seem easy to you because you only have to play 1 note at a time, and you're used to playing up to 8 to 10 notes at a time on a piano. So, all right, so that's the brass family. I've got 2 more quick instruments to show you. Let me put this one down. So the last family that we're going to go over is the percussion family. So like I said, sometimes people think playing percussion is the easiest because you just have to hit things. You still have to learn your notes because in concert band you'll play, starting in the elementary schools, you'll play the bells. But when you get to high school, you'll play a myriad of different instruments. Proper xylophones, which are wooden, like bells, but wood, with sharps and flats on them. Like the Orff instruments, but the Orff instruments don't have the sharps and flats. So a proper xylophone. There's something called a marimba that's made out of wood that's much bigger than the xylophone. Similar sound, much bigger. There's something called a vibraphone that's made out of metal that has tubes and is an electric motor on it. There's something called chimes, which are like you'd hear in a church, and the tubes are metal and they're upright, and you play them with a hammer, but it's set up like a keyboard. There's also the snare drum and all of the difficulties with the snare drum patterns that you have to learn. And then there's 57 other instruments that are just as important to some of the songs that you have to play. And there's technique to all of them. Even a triangle, you think, oh, who you can play a triangle? Triangle's easy, right? No, actually, there's very much a real proper technique to playing the triangle. Same with the tambourine. Even, these are called claves, two wooden sticks. You'd think, oh, I just have to hit the sticks together, right? No, if I hit the sticks together, I get kind of a dull, ugly sound. If I do it right with technique, I lay one stick along my thumb, I curl my other fingers into the other side of the drum, and I can see space through my hand there. I can look straight at the camera through my hand. That provides the echo chamber. Now listen to the difference. Completely different sound. So you'd think, oh, it's just hitting two sticks together. No, it's not. So there's lots of difficulties for that. Okay, so then there's the bells. As a percussionist, you would buy and bring back and forth to school a stick bag. If you rent, you should rent a bell kit. That bell kit will come in a little suitcase-like thing with a stand and a practice pad on top that will look something like this. I don't think you can see the bell kit, so let me hold it up. This is the bell kit with the stand. So you would rent that and use this to practice at home with. And you can take that bell kit off and you can put your practice pad for your snare drum stuff on the top and even screw it on so that that gives you the feel of a drum. So it gives the sticks the bounce of the drum. So you can practice your sticking patterns at home. The reason that I ask you to get a stick bag, you should be able to get one for under 20 bucks. You will, as a percussionist, collect mallets. These are some of the mallets that I've collected over the years. Because every different mallet, that's the joy of percussion, is what you choose to hit something with can totally change the sound. This is a plastic mallet. This is a rubber mallet. This is a timpani mallet. This is a woolen mallet. This is a fancier woolen mallet. Yeah, and they all sound different. So if I am playing the bells, oh, and you want the instrument to be at your hip level. So I'm going to raise this up a little bit. Hopefully it's tall enough for you. Now listen, I'm going to go from the hardest, the plastic. Gives a really bright beginning sound. Now I'm going to go to the rubber. Much mellower sound, much nicer to listen to. If you're at home, I would choose the rubber mallet to play with because it won't annoy your neighbors or your siblings. And a yarn mallet. A little bit louder, timpani mallet. Hardly can even make a sound with. Yeah, anyway, that's percussion. The only other instrument in the band is the bass guitar, and it's electric. Now, let's talk about renting. So, if you are okay for money, your best bet and what we'd like you to do is to rent an instrument, whichever instrument you choose, from a music store. There are basically 3 music stores, 2 of which have actual physical stores in Richmond, and then Tapestry Music, which has a physical store in White Rock and a physical store in Vancouver. But I actually recommend Tapestry because they have a person who's in charge of helping the schools in Richmond. And that person comes to if your instrument's broken, they'll come to the school, pick it up, take it away, get it fixed, bring it back to the school for you. And that kind of service is worth just about anything to me as a teacher, and hopefully to you as a parent, that you don't have to go to the store, drop it off, wait for for it to come back. The stores in Richmond, Long and McQuaid and Tom Lee in Richmond, they actually don't repair the instruments at the stores in Richmond. They have to send them elsewhere to be repaired anyway, so there's always a time delay. Whereas I find the service with Tapestry Music quite easy. Tapestry Music also has a very easy to do online experience for renting instruments. They've been doing it for years, so they don't have to come to the school. You don't have to come to the school. You could be 11 o'clock at night and go, oh yeah, I got to rent that trumpet. Put in all your information, hit go. That trumpet will show up within a day or two at the school for your student to use. So with regards to, renting, if you can't afford it, renting is what we'd like you to do. If money is an issue, very much the district has a certain number, not enough for every student for sure, but quite a few district instruments at the District Resource Center that the district has to loan to kids whose families just don't have the money to rent an instrument. So renting a flute or a clarinet or a trumpet is going to cost you for the year, which is the cheapest way to do it, about $125 around with any of the music stores. I mean, you can shop around, but that's pretty standard. They're pretty competitive for that. Trombone costs you maybe a little bit more, trombone, baritone, a little bit more. Don't rent a tuba, let the district supply a tuba or a tenor saxophone. The alto saxophone is the pricier of them all. That'll cost you at least $160 to $200 a year. It's just a more complicated instrument. It's a more expensive instrument. So the DRC has some instruments that they can give us. Your child would put their top three choices of instruments, and there would be no guarantee that they would get the instrument, their first choice of instrument. They try, but obviously they have to be equitable between all of the elementary schools in the district. So they try to get you your child at least their first or second choice of instrument. And then those instruments go back over the summer, whereas if you rent, you can actually keep the instrument over the summer for free if you've paid for the year and just keep playing the same instrument for the 2 or 3 years that your kid is playing and hopefully into high school. There are 2 instruments that the DRC does not actually have to loan out, which I, as a fairly new teacher to the district, didn't know. They don't rent out percussion kits and they don't rent out bass guitars. So if your child wishes to play percussion or bass guitar, you have to rent those from the stores. There's no way to get a free one. Then the third way to get an instrument, I have a few that I've bought over the years that I do loan out to kids if they are really passionate about a certain instrument and yet money is tight. And the DRC is out of that kind of instrument. I have 1 or 2 of each instrument that I have been known to loan out to kids. Just with the caveat that if the kid wrecks it in any way, then the repair for that instrument, I would hope that you would be willing to pay for the repair for that instrument. And I don't have any insurance to get those repairs done, which is something the music stores will sell you, is insurance for $1 a month or something like that, and it usually has a deductible of about $100, but it's pretty good insurance that, you know, if the instrument gets totally wrecked, they'll replace it. So yeah, so renting, DRC, I have a few instruments. Oh, so 2 other things. You can get instruments in August, September. Sometimes the big box stores, Costco, London Drugs, Superstore, they'll get in shipments of what appear to be very, very cheap instruments. Like you'll see a stack of about 100 alto saxophones, and they'll be selling them for $300 each. And you know for sure that at the music store, those saxophones cost at least $900 to $1,200 for even the beginner ones. So you're thinking, oh, $300, that's awesome, let me pick that up. Please don't. They are not made of quality metal. The keys bend on them, like literally just bend, and they don't work. And the kid will be frustrated all year. You can't even take them to the repair shops because the repair guys, and I've worked with the repair guys, they take one look at it and go, so if this key gets bent on this instrument, the metal is strong enough that they can heat it up a little, bend it back into position, and then when it cools off, it's okay again. You don't want to do that too often, but on those cheap instruments, if they even try to heat up the metal, the key falls off. So please don't buy, if it seems like it's too good of a deal, it's probably too good of a deal. The other place where parents might look for instruments is, I have picked up instruments at pawn shops. I have picked up instruments on Craigslist and Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace. My only rider for that is, please have someone who knows what they're doing play it, because it can be a perfectly good brand name Yamaha. This is a Bundy clarinet. There's lots of different brands, but it can seem like a perfectly good instrument, but if you don't know what you're doing, you might not notice that this keys pad is missing or is rotting, and that if you know what you're doing, you go to play that instrument, it won't make a good sound. So don't buy anything off the internet that you can't test. If you need some help testing it, email me. Because I think I bought this clarinet for 50 bucks at a pawn shop. But I can go into a pawn shop, I have my own reeds, I play the instrument, and I know if it's any good or not. And then I can pick it up for 50 bucks and away we go. So that's it. That's my presentation, intro into concert band. I hope it was useful. Email me. My email is cabrams, CABRAMS, @sd38.bc.ca. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I do aim for that pyramid of sound, but usually it works itself out to be okay, even without me getting my fingers mixed up in it too badly. Sometimes the bands sound a little out of balance, but that's not the end of the world anyway. Look forward to seeing you in September, and thanks very much for taking the time to have a look at this. Bye!